today we have something a little bit different. We've got a panel of licensed architects who achieved licensure early on in their careers. And we're going to talk about some of the advantages of early licensure and hear about their experience going through the licensure process. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks to our panelists for being willing to speak with everyone. I'm going to kind of go through and do a brief introduction from this slide, and then we'll dig into it a little bit more. So we've got myself, Matt Young. I'm the director of product at Amber Book. We've got Alec Yuzhbabenko, who is a design principal at Hanbury. Melanie Ray is an associate at Hord, Coplan, and Macht. And we've got Cole McDonell, who is a studio leader at BLAINE Architects. Thanks for joining, everyone. And just to get started, an introductory question, kind of go around the horn. If you could start out by telling the audience who you are, when you passed your AREs, and then when you got licensed. Let's start with Alec, move on to Melanie, and then hear from you, Cole.
All right. So where I'm from, bit of my background. I'm actually from Ukraine. Moved to the States when I was about 7 years old. Very quickly going through history, moved to Alabama. Then my dad's ship got brought up to Norfolk, Virginia. Ever since then, been on the East Coast of Virginia. Went to Virginia Tech Architecture School for undergrad. That's sort of been my passion ever since high school. It's construction and architecture. So Tech was like the only school I applied for. I graduated high school in 2010, graduated Tech in 2015, 5-year program. I sort of incrementally went and took my exams. I started in ARE 4 and then transitioned. So took 2 exams. And then transitioned and then got licensed in 2019. And actually Amber Book, at the time, Michael Ehrman was giving like a Virginia Tech alumni discount basically for the trial period.
Yeah.
2 months. And so he gave me the trial period for 2 months, and I took it. And then I took my last 2 exams in those 2 months to round off and got licensed. So 2019, I've been licensed.
Awesome. How about you, Melanie?
So I am currently in Baltimore, Maryland. I grew up in was born in Jersey, Jersey City, to be exact. Moved down to Maryland when I was about 8. But growing up, my dad was and is also an architect. So I was introduced to the field pretty early. I didn't decide until college applications to actually pursue a career in architecture. I also graduated high school in 2010, went to Penn State for the 5-year program, also graduated in 2015. I got into Virginia Tech, but I didn't like the Hokie Stones, so I decided to go to State College. And after graduating, came back to Baltimore and started my exams probably about 1.5 years after I had started working, and also did the transition from 4.0 to 5.0. And finished my exams in about 1 year to get licensed. Finished my exams in February of 2018 and got licensed literally like 2 weeks later because DC had a really quick turnaround. So 2018 is my licensure.
Awesome. How about you, Cole? A little more recent, right?
More recent. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Cole. Similarly to Alec, I have wanted to be an architect for as long as I remember, and Virginia Tech was the only school that I applied to. And I went there from 2014 to 2015. Grew up in Virginia, lived there my whole life. And so when I graduated in 2019, Just said I love Virginia, but kind of want to change of pace, want to see something new. Moved out to California, and I started working for a firm there. And then I got licensed last year, 2023. And it was similar to Melanie. It was a pretty quick process from AREs to licensure because it was the last step. I had already gotten all my hours. I did what Amber Book recommended. I took them all at once and I passed them all at once. So I went from no AREs to being licensed within about 3 weeks.
Wow. That's nice. That's awesome. Great. Thanks everybody for introducing yourselves a little bit. I think we'll repeat the same cycle with this kind of additional question, which is, how do you think obtaining licensure early in your career has impacted your growth and opportunities? Of course, Melanie and Alec, you've been licensed a little bit longer than Cole, so maybe your answer is a little bit different, but has being licensed started to impact your decision-making on your career? What are some of the, post-licensure, how has that affected your outlook on your career and your opportunities for growth? Start with Alec.
All right. I think my first step when I started working and I got a business card with my name on it and you feel official. And then I saw architectural intern under my name. Like that rubbed me the wrong way. So first of all, I didn't like that at all. So then at the firm I was with, I was like, can we not call anybody interns? So we went through the whole process and we just decided that everybody would be called designers. But that's beside the point. I still had that card and I was fortunate enough to be presenting at meetings with the partners in the firm. And then I would leave a card because the clients would ask for a card and I would leave an architectural intern card. And they're just kind of like, oh, okay. Are you like just here for the summer? And I was like, oh man, all right. That means something to somebody. So that was motivation for me to go get licensed and at least put that notch under my belt. Also, there's motivation because I was getting ready to get engaged. So I was like, I'm not getting into that part of my life without getting licensed. So I'm going to knock that out. So it's twofold, a little personal, but the piece of it, once I did get licensed, people's perception of you, even though you haven't changed as a person, you still bring the same thing you bring to the table. The outside perspective, because our industry is so aged, I believe, a lot of the older clients respected it a lot more. So all of a sudden I was their peer and my age didn't really matter to them. It was the fact and the reassurance that I had AIA next to my name and it didn't no longer said architectural designer, architectural intern. So I think it was twofold a little bit, but then ever since then, I've been able to advance within the firm quite a bit. I've been able to, and it's not just the title, it's not just the licensure, it's a combination of everything, but it did help clients see me in a different way. And in turn, clients asked for me, and in turn, the firm saw me as a client leader. And then that's kind of where I am today. So I think it's a little cyclical, but it's all interconnected. So it's a holistic kind of approach to it. It's not just a one solve solution.
Definitely. How about you, Melanie? Any comments on how obtaining licensure back in 2019 has impacted your professional growth and opportunities?
Definitely. I would echo a lot of what Alec said in that having the title of architect, having AIA behind your name is such a differentiator. And I think in particular, for me as a Black woman, I knew that licensure, as that having that certification would really play an impact in my career development. My dad has, told me, I've had horror stories of experiences that he's had in the industry early on in his career when he was not licensed. And so having those credentials were a really big goal for me coming out of school. I think it's like long term in terms of that career development. It's just opened up the opportunities. And so now at this point in my career, rather than being kind of bogged down by this kind of daunting goal that many people deal with of obtaining licensure, getting out of the way early, it set me apart from my peers at the time. And so, similar to what Alec was saying, like it really does put you on that leadership path, because as an architect, you have the same credentials as firm leadership within your firm, within other firms, and externally, it does play a really big role in what opportunities are presented to you. Just so many opportunities and so many things that I've been able to participate in because I was approached. I mean, this panel is one example, really being approached because of the certification that I have that, I utilize on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. Thanks. How about you, Cole?
Yeah, I think both of you mentioned a lot of great points. Alec, the respect thing you brought up is definitely, it does impact perception of you, but I might push it a little bit because you mentioned even though you haven't changed, people see you differently. I would argue that you probably have changed because at least for me, I grew a lot even with the act of studying. It opened my eyes to kind of the breadth of what being an architect means. It taught me a lot of things, and you're not going to remember all of it, but even the act of studying, I think, does change you a little bit in that you have an idea what to keep an eye out. Even if you don't remember all the charts and everything, you might know where to look. I think it teaches you a lot about the behind the scenes of firms that as a drafter and lower level, you might not get a lot of insight into. So I do think absolutely there's that respect in the change in perception. And I think it's earned. I think you do get there, and I do think you change through the process. And Melanie, like you said, the opportunities that get presented, that's very real too, because people do approach you with things, but I think it's getting licensed is really all about just showing the industry that you've come to the table, you're playing by the rules, you've done what you need to do to get to a certain level. And I think especially if you do it early, that shows people that you're a go-getter and you can be approached and you can handle these situations. And like you said, getting it out of the way, the longer you put it off, the easier it becomes to put it off. And I didn't put it off for that long, but I still felt for every year that I did put it off, it became a little easier to justify, I have a trip planned, I'll do it in the fall or something. So the earlier you can sit down and commit to it, the better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One thing, we were just some of our Amber Book folks were at the Virginia Tech Career Fair, where I think you were as well, Alec, maybe. And, it's our first time ever going to a career fair, and we were really curious to see how many students had the licensure process, specifically the exams, on their radar. And not many did, right? You're really focused on kind of getting out of the gate, getting a job, honestly, finishing your degree. It's oftentimes those degrees are quite hard to complete. And I think that there's a great opportunity to take advantage of these good study skills that you have, and maybe not so many things in life piling up yet, to go ahead and start knocking out the exams. And it's something that we're trying to do a better job of helping students and recent grads have some understanding of, because we think it's a great time to do it. It only gets harder, in our opinion, unless, of course, you're able to take a little gap between jobs or something that might make it a little bit easier. But yeah, I think that the longer you wait, the harder it can potentially be. I have another question, and we'll maybe go in reverse order now. But let's talk about, there's this level of respect that you all spoke to, and opportunity. But did you see any like direct benefits, whether that was you were more eligible for a promotion, or obviously not studying anymore is a benefit, but what's your work-life balance pre-licensure and post-licensure? Cole, could you start us off and speak to that as you see fit?
I'll start with the first part, the promotion part. And I use licensure in a maybe clever way with my company. We were in need of a position to be filled to kind of bridge the gap between designers and the principals. And so at the time I was senior designer, but there really needed to be an in-between role. And so since the testing went so fast, I kind of used that as like, oh, we need a role to be filled. Let me just run out and get licensed real quick. And so phrasing it that way and like spinning it with that kind of attitude, I think really resonated with them too. So there was definitely a much more open path to promotion with licensure, and it did directly impact my role in the company. And as far as work-life balance, that's something that I advocate for regardless of licensure. And that's something I always encourage architects to do, because it's not something we see very often in the industry. So I don't think that licensure itself had a big impact on it. I do think a general attitude of sticking up for yourself and getting your work done, obviously that's step number one, but I do think advocating for that is more of a personal goal than a licensure one.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole. Melanie?
Yeah, I'll also start with the first question about just earning potential in general. So it's an interesting question, because I think there is an assumption that once you get licensed, you will like automatically make $10,000 more, and every year your salary is going to go up exponentially. I actually found it definitely depends on the firm, and I would encourage those of you that are approaching that or looking at firms to ask that question. What are the benefits upon licensure? There may be like a small bonus, like an award of some sort, and then maybe at your annual bonus that year may be a little bit bigger to accommodate or reflect that change. But it is something that you do have to ask for and ask about, and just make sure that your firm is aware of it. It does, though, open up and remove barriers to future earning potential. So, for example, at many firms, mine included, promotion or licensure is more or less a prerequisite for promotion. And I think part of that comes from the idea that, within the architecture industry, it's hard to be a leader in a firm without being a licensed architect. And so not to say that, those opportunities are not there, but it can be very difficult if, the field is a certification and establishing yourself in the architecture profession. You want to have that certification behind your name. So getting it done early, yes, there are some monetary benefits connected to it, depending on where you are. But it becomes less of a barrier if you don't have it, later on, as you're trying to push higher and higher up the salary ladder. And then with regards to work-life balance, I do too many things. I'm in a lot of things, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. I will say when I was studying for the exams, it was really helpful not to have any commitments, like major commitments at the time. So, no major family commitments. I kind of was just enjoying life, living as a young professional in Baltimore. So I could really set my schedule around my testing schedule and my exams. And then working with my direct team, letting them know, like, if an exam is coming up, that my workload may need to reflect that, or can I work on certain aspects of the project because next week I'm taking PDD and I would love to focus more on wall sections than concept work because I already passed programming. And so I think there are ways that you can more closely relate your work tasks, your day-to-day task at work with what you're studying at the time, so that it doesn't feel like you're doing two different jobs when you're studying for those exams.
Definitely. How about you, Alec?
I'll start with a work-life balance. I'm like Melanie, I hardly ever say no. So I find myself in a lot of things and piled up, and I think it only is getting faster and more as I progress in my career. So I couldn't imagine pausing to take exams. I have kids, like house, there's things that need to be done. So once you're in school and you're in that academic mode, like just keep doing it and just finish the exams and get it over with. It is, despite not saying no, I do make it a point to get my work done as efficiently as I can and experience the world, because there's no way that we as designers can design for the world if we don't experience it ourselves. So you have to put ourselves in that perspective to design in the shoes of the humanity, rather than just putting an object into the world and thinking you're designing for architects. So that's like where it's absolutely critical, not only for yourself and your well-being, but when you plug, like deplug or whatever you want to call it, and when you come back, you're a lot more effective than if you just continuously drown yourself the entire time. I'm in a firm that super advocates for licensure and supports emerging professionals, where we have a group of emerging professionals that will study together. We provide resources in the firm. Our firm at Hanbury will pay for every first exam. So if you pass on first try, you don't have to pay for any exams. And then once you get your license, you get, and maybe it's changed ever since I got licensed, but you get a $2,000 bonus just on the spot, as just an acknowledgement, and then a beer. So somebody will buy you a beer. So that's nice. And then, like Melanie said, it's based on the firm, right? It's based on what the trajectory is, what value you're bringing. But more than likely, if you're licensed, you will rise a lot quicker than somebody that is at a school in the designer role, and they can be very effective in that designer role. But if you don't come across as hungry to go to the next thing, then you'll kind of stay where you are, and you'll just seem happy and complacent.
Yeah, just to jump in a little bit here, I think all of you raised some great points, but I personally used licensure to get out of a job that wasn't really working well for me. It was like in this case, a smaller office, and kind of felt stuck. And so getting my license opened up doors, well, in this case, to teach other people how to pass their licensure exams, but just generally, to go out into the job market and find better opportunities with this credential that shows, the industry that I think Cole said it, that you've kind of like put in the work and you're able to kind of play by the book. Okay, so a couple more questions and then we'll actually go into the audience, see if anyone has any questions for y'all. But the question that I think is probably on the minds of the folks who are attending this session is, looking back on your licensure process, is there anything that you would have done differently? And I know we've touched on like, just go ahead and get it done. Melanie was just talking about, building into your life a little bit of a flexible schedule. But if and it sounds like, Alec, that maybe you are mentoring some folks and giving them some advice already. But starting with Cole, if you could do it all again, is there anything that you would do differently? And what would be your advice to someone who's in the middle of the licensure process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'm a little bit fortunate in a way that I don't think I would do much differently. I mentioned earlier that I put it off for a few years, but I think one of the good things about that is you're not just approaching the exams with a purely academic mindset. You've seen the real world, you've been on construction sites, if you've been out in the professional world for a few years. And I think that goes a long way towards retaining the information that you're seeing when you're studying, because then you can actually relate it to things that you've seen. So one, I think that's good. While I do recommend taking it early, I think a few years under your belt does help. And one thing I tried to do when I was studying is not to shut everything else out. I had a few friends that wanted to just kind of shut down for several months at a time, and they reached out to all their friends, me included, and just said, hey, I'm going to be heads down for a while. We don't want anybody to reach out. We just need to study. And I think that took a really heavy toll on them. And I honestly don't think it helped them that much. I took studying pretty seriously. I put in a lot of work to it, but I also didn't let it stop me from going to visit friends, and I think like the other panelists mentioned too, you need to approach it with a fresh mind sometimes, and just taking that break and coming back to it, I think is a totally valid and true thing. So I wouldn't change much about what I did, but I would recommend using your real world experience to help inform the studying, and to build in some time to have fun too.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole. How about you, Melanie? Yeah.
I also don't think I would change anything. I was pretty proud of, my commitment to getting it done. My goal personally was to get licensed by 25. And so I met that mark by just a couple of months. I think I generally committed to a pretty regular schedule of like scheduling the exam 3, maybe 4 weeks. And then I just had like a very intense study schedule within that time period, and then built in like a 2-week break before I started the next one. The only time where I broke that schedule is when I thought I could squeeze in a trip to Peru in between my study schedule. And that might have been my only regret, in that I broke my 3 to 4 week study period and extended it to like a 6 to 8 with a 2-week break in between. And that was the only exam that I failed. Mm-hmm. And so I realized in that moment that I'm someone who, once I stick to that goal, I'm really committed to that, and I know I can get it done. But just that one kind of distraction at that time. So I'd say like once you find a study schedule that works for you, or a study process, a location, something, like stick to it, because any disruption to that could really change your approach to how you access and pass that exam.
Awesome. Thanks for your advice. How about you, Alec?
Well, as I like to say, I hacked the system going from ARE 4 to 5 and transitioning and only having to take 5 tests. So there's no way that I would do it all over again. To not have that was really nice. I think a lot, to Cole's point, right? I interned every summer throughout school. So I gained experience while I was still in school. And then there was valuable experience that I learned after graduation. So I took the exams based on where I felt like I was strongest at the time on my workload. So what I was working on, I related it to an exam, and I was like, this is the most direct thing. As I'm working on a project, I want to learn more about it, and I'll just start studying. And so I limited myself to, I would limit myself to 4 weeks of studying, roughly 3 hours a night for 3 weeks. And I would take, on the 4th week, I would take the test. I would take a day off before, just kind of cleanse the system, and then take it. Luckily, I passed everyone on the first try, so that system worked for me. But don't feel yourself out, because you will hear so many different answers out there of how to do it, when to do it, like what's the routine, ritual. Feel yourself out. What are you most comfortable with? Approaching that exam, if you got the jitters and you're just all over the place, like you're going to be your worst enemy going into that exam. And you're most likely not going to do well just because you're second guessing yourself. Your intuition is hazed. And a lot of that test is based on experience, but it's based on just the best answer that comes for that piece. So I think no, I wouldn't do anything differently, not even timing, even though I say, yeah, test earlier. Everything lined up where I was still able to enjoy I was in my mid-20s. That was good life, and I did not shut the world out. Like Cole said, don't do that. It's so important to have that well-rounded experience. It's not worth it if you shut out.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I talk to folks who are in the middle of testing, one of the things that I stress is that you want to be relaxed and you want to be confident, and whatever it takes for you to find yourself in that place where you're feeling both of those things is what you should do. So for some people that means they need to study more. For some people that might mean they need to take a day off beforehand. I think that's a great idea. Some people have a resting heart rate of 45 beats per minute. Like some people are cool as a cucumber, right? So it's not a one size fit all, but I think the general takeaway is that no one regrets any of it. I was talking to a group of high school students a couple of weeks ago, and someone asked me, "Do you regret becoming an architect?" And I was like, "Absolutely not," which is so much easier to say post licensure, right? Like once you have the credential, it's like it all feels worth it, right? So I think it's also just kind of about making a plan. That's what I'm hearing from all of you, making a plan that fits into your life, that it doesn't kind of own your life, and just sticking with it until you've gotten across the finish line. I'm going to open it up to our audience for a few questions. Let's see. Folks want to raise their hands if they have any questions for our panelists. Okay. Screech. Hopefully. Okay, Screech, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Here we go. Let's hear your question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I dropped the question in the chat, but I'm looking for it now. What did studying consist of? Was it questions or reading, and define your method of studying?
Great question. Let's start with Cole.
Yeah, I mean, my process was I started with the videos because I think they're intuitive. I'm more of a visual learner, as I suspect most creatives are. So I started with the videos. Don't tell Michael, but I watched them on 1.5 or 2 times speed.
Yeah.
And then if you don't understand something, you can go back, rewatch it. But I think a lot of it, it comes down to getting acquainted with the material and then choosing where you deep dive. Like I mentioned before, if something that the videos are mentioning are something that you're already familiar with in work or something you've seen on site, then that's something that you can kind of trust yourself on. And then for the parts that needed a deeper dive, I would read the comments on Immerbook. I might watch the video again. And then a few other things. I mostly stuck to Immerbook, but I did, a long time ago, I bought the Ballast book, and I would go through, if there was a particularly difficult thing I was having trouble understanding, I would read what that had to say about the topic too. And hearing it in those two different perspectives usually reconciled it for me, and I was able to piece it together. So as far as process, it was pretty simple, just figuring out what I don't know and then deep diving on what I don't know. And then the biggest part for me was the practice exams. I think those are invaluable. I think they do wonders, not just for your retention of the knowledge, but really for just getting acquainted with the test, because that's a big part of it, right? You could know everything, and if you're not a great test taker, it can be intimidating. You can overthink, you can get in your head. And the practice exams were just a way to feel comfortable, like it's not like you're getting surprised. And I think those were probably the biggest help to me. The Immerbook versions were okay. I think they had a lot of information, but the NCARB ones, I think that should be something that every single one of you guys should do, every single one of those practice exams.
Definitely. Yeah, it's hard to beat old exam questions for practice. I talk a lot with people in the licensure process about how a big part of these exams is starting to learn NCARB's voice and how to read their writing, essentially. How about you, Melanie? How did you study for your exams?
Yeah, so in terms of schedule, similar to Alec, I set a 3 to 4 week schedule. I set aside about 2 to 3 hours, like at least 4 nights a week after work. And I actually made like an Excel calendar and checked off like which chapters or which practice exams or like what I needed to cover that day, so that I knew that I got through all of the material that I had determined at the beginning of my studying period that I wanted to get through. There's a ton of really great and a ton of really not great study material out there. And I learned early on that you can't read everything. You can't get through all the videos. And so establishing from the beginning what your core materials are going to be and mapping that out in your study schedule was really helpful just to get to a goal. And if there was any extra time, I would refer to some other materials. I usually would start the beginning of the month with a practice exam to see where my weak points were. And I would make sure that I focused really heavily on that section. And like with the NCARB materials, I really appreciated the reference of the textbooks at the end of the handbook. I made my firm buy all of those textbooks to start, building our ARE library. And so really going to like the source material as well, like all of these third-party study materials are great because it's very synthesized and it's very comprehensive. But sometimes, pulling out that really big, the Mead book that we had to buy for the MEP class that we probably opened like once or twice in school, that was really helpful studying for like building systems and that exam. And then the last thing that I did, I found a study buddy, a partner. And so on the weekends, we would keep each other accountable. We would meet at this really cute coffee shop in Federal Hill in Baltimore. And we were there probably from like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. when they closed, just studying together, referencing questions together. Found out that the owner was a civil engineer in a past life, asked him some questions while I was there. Just really sharing in that experience with someone so that you don't have to go through it alone.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, you never know who is a helpful resource. I often encourage people, if you're studying, mechanical systems and you're walking on the job site, ask the question that you're having trouble with to your installer or MEP consultant, because that's the best way to learn is face to face, word of mouth. How about you, Alec? How did you study?
I want to follow up on that last comment you just made. Nobody's going to think any less of you on the job site if you say, what does that acronym stand for that you just said? And they'll be like, oh, let me explain it to you. Because in reality, the contractors are, it's presumed, masters of their work, and you're in your field, the engineers are in their field. So don't be afraid to ask questions that you might think oh, I'm going to look, younger and unqualified if I ask that question. Just make sure you do that. That's one big thing that I want to emphasize. To the initial question that was asked though, my studying a lot was what Cole and Melanie said, the practice exams. I just would go through those over and over and over and over again, find out which ones I'm getting wrong, dive into those sections. But to me, I started in Coplan and Ballast and all those resources. So we still had vignettes. I don't think vignettes exist anymore. But I would get a binder and I would have the resources in that binder and physical paper that I could write and highlight and underline and write myself notes, because that was memory and understanding. If I would write it again, if I would make a chart physically, I know it's very easy to just be on your laptop. So physical connection to the material was important to me. And the other piece is, yes, we're all creative visual learners. So the videos, whenever I did those last two exams, and I did it through Amber Book, although my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, they recognized Michael Irvin's voice from a mile away. Those videos helped just kind of solidify some things that weren't clear, especially the diagrams, all the kind of pump systems, all that. That was very beneficial in the videos.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that idea of building yourself your own kind of case study, because I feel that's a skill that you're not just practicing for the exam, but for most projects that you work on, for the rest of your career. We've cleared our time, and so I wanted to kind of roll through a closing question. But first, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks to our panelists, Alec, Melanie, and Cole, for joining us and sharing their experiences. The last question that I want to ask all y'all is, what's next for you? Your license, you're getting established in the field. What are some of your next goals? What are, is it a kind of project that you're looking to do? Or are you, working up in your firm? What's next? And we'll start with Alec.
what's next? I love that question because I ask myself that every year, what's my 2-year track and what's my 5-year track? So I became associate principal shortly after getting licensed at the firm. I became design principal 2.5 years after that. I'm helping lead design on a variety of projects within the firm, helping sort of mentor design teams through various projects. To me, what's next is sort of doing this and helping sort of the next class graduate, go through the process, because in turn they'll help me do better, and I want to hire better than me. So then to elevate the work that I do constantly on a day-to-day basis and make it even better. This year I got voted as the youngest member of the board of directors for the firm.
Wow.
So that's a pretty great accomplishment. That still hasn't sunk in for me yet, because that was like my 5-year track, and it happened this year, which is taken me a little bit off guard. So now I'm recalibrating, adjusting to that, and realizing what it means to be at that level of the firm, and adjusting to the work and more delegating design rather than doing it myself. So that's been an adjustment. So I'm hopefully for my next couple of years, I get a little clarity for myself for that.
Awesome. And congratulations. That's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah. And, Alec and I went to school together, and I specifically remember there was this, competition during your thesis year and my 4th year for, it was like a charrette in the state of Virginia. And I was like redesigning highway infrastructure in Virginia Beach. And it seemed like Alec always made the best renderings, and I'm not exaggerating. And I remember you proposing like a wave pool for this charrette project. I did something that was almost like a sarcastic submission. And then now this project, which was kind of born out of your thesis, is also in the process of being built. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very impractical path that I've taken, but yeah, my thesis project, the competition is getting built as we speak, about 20 minutes down the road.
Amazing.
So three city blocks around a surf park in Virginia Beach called Atlantic Park.
Awesome. That's awesome. How about you, Melanie? What's next? What's on your kind of vision board?
It's hard to follow that. Congratulations. That's awesome. Both the project and the board position. I also have like leadership in my sights. I think part of my active involvement has definitely gotten me into the rooms of a lot of organizations within my firm, within different communities, to really make a difference. So, I look forward to continuing to move up in general firm leadership within my company, but also I started my career in multifamily housing and market rate housing specifically. And I wanted to pivot a bit and focus more on affordable housing. And so I'm really excited to take a lot of what I learned within the first few years of my career, and also as a licensed architect, and applying that to, creating communities and housing for all. So that's kind of my immediate goals right now. And then also just kind of like refining what leadership means for me. And so really focusing on what I'm most passionate about and where I can really make the biggest difference. I'll also give a shameless plug because the big thing that I'm working on right now is that our chapter, Be More Noma, is hosting the Noma conference in October in Baltimore. So come to Baltimore.
Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna. If you didn't mention Noma, I was gonna, make sure to share with the audience that you're an active member, and our Amber Book team has been really fortunate to start to build a partnership with Noma, and I'm super glad that you're sort of trying to bring everyone up with you, and yeah, I'm sure the conference is taking a lot of planning, but I'm sure it'll be a great time for everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. And last but not least, how about you, Cole? What's next for you? What is the horizon you're pointing towards?
Sure. I'll keep it pretty quick because I think one of the really nice things about licensure is that there are so many options. And I think that's just the beauty of it. You could do so many more things. And so for me, I don't have my heart set on one dedicated track. I think I'm still riding that high a little bit of licensure. And I'm excited that I do start to see so many paths before me. And that it's not something that's looming over you anymore. It's kind of done and you'll never have to do it again. And so I think for me, it's much more about the fact that you can keep the opportunities open and the paths open rather than having a set path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks again to our panelists for speaking about their licensure experience. Thanks for everyone who attended the call today. And as always, good luck and go get licensed.